Hello, everyone. My name is Lynn McEntee. We would like to welcome you to the Toronto Diversity Festival panel discussion. In particular, Moksha Canada Foundation is hosting this event. It is going to be at Toronto Diversity Festival at Nathan Phillips Square on August 27th, 11 a.m. until 10 p.m. We are celebrating life. We are celebrating unity. We are celebrating diversity. Thank you to Moksha Canada for allowing this to happen. We're about connecting, engaging, and empowering our communities to engage and explore and learn together. That's what we're here for today. We have a panel discussion actually one of two, that we're going to be celebrating diversity and inclusion, but learning about diversity and inclusion and truly what that means. So we have a variety of experts here today who will be engaging us in this conversation, but also hopefully engaging and raising the bar in conversation for future with the community. Welcome to all of our guests here today. My name is Lynn McEntee. I'm your host for the Toronto Diversity Festival Unity and Diversity panel discussion. On my left is Chef Suman.
Hi everyone, this is Chef Suman here. I am originally from Bahrain. It's a tiny island in the Middle East. A lot of people don't know where it is, so I usually end up saying that it's near Saudi Arabia, near Dubai. But that's one of the reasons why I'm here. And Canada's been home for the last 8 years. And I'm on a mission to basically change people's mindset that the Middle Eastern region, the Bahraini food culture and scene is more than shawarma and falafel. So,
Thank you, Chef Suman. On Suman's left is Dr. Dion Poulton.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Dr. Dion Poulton. I am originally from Toronto, Canada. I was actually born here and have lived in the States for probably 30 years, but I still come back and forth. A lot of families here. I started off as a classroom teacher, working for the Toronto Board of Education, and segued into diversity work. And my most recent position, I was a Chief Diversity Officer for a healthcare system, overseeing DEI for 3 hospitals, 4 medical facilities, and over 80 sites in Rhode Island. Thank you.
Thank you so much. On the left of Dr. Dion Poulton, we have Tushar Unadkat.
Thank you, Lynn. I'm originally from India, and I left India in 1996. I went to Europe for my further education. I lived in England, Scotland, Germany, France, Netherlands, before moving to New York. I was in New York for 5 years, and I arrived in Canada in 2006. That has been an amazing journey because it exposed me to a much international level of diversity and inclusive ideas. And I'm very excited about this panel. I come from marketing and communications background, and I look forward to hearing all the other panelists and discuss this much important topic, which is so relevant to Toronto being a most multicultural city in the world.
Thank you so much. We also have on the left of Tushar is actually Manika Fashion, who's Manika Gaudet.
Hello, I'm very happy to be here. My name is Manika Gaudet. I was born in Quebec from Acadian parents. Acadians are from the east coast of Canada, and I'm also a mix of Mi'kmaq, American Indians from the East Coast. I was born in Quebec, and I worked pretty much all my life in Montreal, Canada. I worked in the industry of fashion for many years as a senior designer. And in 2012, I launched my line of clothing called Manic Fashion. And I'm happy to bring a fashion that is based on reflecting the personality of the client and not bringing everyone towards the same trends. So I'm actually a painter. I paint on my clothing, and I actually want to prove that each person is unique and each person has its own personality.
Thank you so much. On the left of Manika, we have MPP Aris Babikian. Welcome.
Thank you very much for Moksha for organizing this very important mean festivities to celebrate our differences. I am from Lebanon with Armenian and Greek roots. I speak 4 languages. I have been serving my second term as member of the provincial parliament for Scarborough Agincourt. Previously, I was citizenship judge. I have been involved in the multiculturalism issues for a long time. I was the secretary of the Canadian Ethnocultural Council of Canada, which is an umbrella organization for the multicultural communities in Canada. I am a member of the National Ethnic and Media Press of Canada. So all my life I have been involved since my arrival 43 years ago. I have been involved in the multiculturalism, advocacy, trying to celebrate our differences, our cultures, and make Canada a better place for everyone.
As you can see, we have a lot of guest experts here today, and a little bit about myself. So I'm host of programs, director of development and special events for Moksha Canada Foundation. But my background is teaching international students and exploring unity and diversity. I'm also an actor for theater, film, and radio. But I humbly arrive on the scene to learn and grow with our guest panelists today. We're all about welcoming everyone to the table. Moksha Canada Foundation is anyone and everyone is welcome. So we're exploring diversity and inclusion today to kickstart our TDF, our Toronto Diversity Festival panel discussion. I'm just going to start out with Dr. Dion Poulton. Her background is diversity and inclusion. As she mentioned, she's also been an educator. And I wondered if perhaps we can just take a moment to lead off the conversation with her. One of the questions I did pose to Dionne, Dr. Dionne, is diversity and inclusion are commonly used terms. And I would like Dr. Dion Poulton to help us understand what these actually mean.
Thanks for that. So I would say, unfortunately, those words seem to be overused quite a bit lately, especially since George Floyd's murder. And some people kind of co-opt the words and don't necessarily believe in them or actually demonstrate what they are. But I would say, from my standpoint, diversity means that we are acknowledging differences. That means that we're not expecting people to be the same. We are acknowledging there are differences amongst people, and we're celebrating that, as was shared. And unfortunately, sometimes in the employment sector, people are often, they're hired for diversity, but they're rewarded for conformity. And so there's a bit of a tension that's been going on, I would say, in the workplace. But I would say diversity is truly accepting people as they are, as they come, as their authentic selves. Inclusion is what do you do once you get them in the door? Oftentimes people believe, oh, I'm going to just pull somebody in, and all of a sudden my job is over, they're now here, but then you leave them to the wayside, and they flounder, they don't have a mentor, they don't have support, and they end up leaving. I heard about the word retention. They end up leaving the organization. So inclusion means we are including people. And I always say that it's important for the existing environment or department to include the person in, to invite them in. It's not that person's job to change who they are to fit in with the group. We have to be welcoming, we have to be open, we have to be accepting and respectful of people's differences, and that way people can truly feel like they are a part of the team.
So, and just recapping again, if you don't mind, Dr. Dionne, Dr. Poulton, is diversity then is difference, and inclusion is as is. Everyone is welcome.
Yeah, and also the word belonging seems to come up quite a bit as well. It's does that person feel like they want to belong to this organization? Do they want to belong to this area where they're coming in? And belonging is tied to what are people doing to facilitate that person's comfort level? Mm-hmm. Do they feel comfortable? Do they feel like they want to be there? Because we do know that when people are not comfortable, there's increased absenteeism. People go on leaves of absences. People quit. There's so many different consequences to people not feeling included. So it's extremely important, especially now, for organizations to make sure that you're doing what you need to do to make sure people feel okay.
It's interesting because you talked about they're overused at times, and I often do hear it in conversation. But just as you had said, it's not really implemented, if you will. So it's nice to see if we can start that at a very early age in education, from a very young age, and educating our young on what that truly means and what that looks like, that everyone is welcome at the table and that the door is open. Right? Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you for starting the conversation.
My pleasure.
All righty. I'm going to go over to you, Chef Suman, if you could talk a little bit about your industry, being a female in the culinary industry, and what that looked like perhaps starting on, and all of the other things you would like to share with us in terms of how important it is to engage all and welcome all to the table.
Thank you, Lynn. First of all, once again, thank you for Moksha for getting this together. This is really phenomenal and helps young leaders like me to get the word out there. And just to be able to share this platform with all these experienced individuals is an honor for me. what I can say, especially about the culinary industry, it is competitive in general. Even if you're, regardless of what background you come from, regardless of what your gender is, it is a competitive industry. You need an edge to be sustainable in long term to survive in the industry. Long hours, you're missing out Thanksgiving, you're gonna miss out on all of your friends' birthdays, weddings, New Year, Christmas, everything, you're gonna miss it out. But then if you're passionate about it, obviously, it has long-lasting rewards to it. But now when I add a bit of a frame of, how it is challenging for women in the industry as well, it is significantly still, 2022, a male-dominant industry. Like, that is the fact. When I sit down at a table with 12 other chefs, I'm usually just the one. Yes, there is work in progress. Yes, there's a lot of inclusion. There's a lot of training and support that is being put in process. But it is like, we are still quite far ahead from it. But how are we going to fix it? Like, what is a long-term solution for it? Is it just that, okay, we are having, let's say, for instance, just like how Doctor said over here, that inclusion is very important, but just not for the sake of it. There's a lot of back-end training. There's a lot of back-end educational platforms that is important and needed to be provided as well. So one thing I can go ahead and share over here is I've been in the industry for 12 plus years now. I know a lot of times one thing people find very intimidating, or a lot of male chefs also find intimidating, is to see young female co-workers or young female leaders. But it is very important for these other counterparts of yours to understand that we're in this together. We have to support each other, uplift each other, and that's how you would rate your efficiency as a leader. That's how you would rate your efficiency as an organization, by supporting the youngsters as well.
Do you mind if I ask then some of the challenges, for example, when you first entered into the industry? You've mentioned a few, but perhaps a challenge and maybe a success story in terms of overcoming adversity.
Sure.
Yes.
Maybe not so much as a success story, but I do want to share it. It's a very small thing. You will think that really that does happen. So I'll give you an example. Has happened to me, has happened to a lot of other female chefs in the kitchen. So let's say, for instance, if you were chopping a vegetable and if you had a finger cut. So because you're a woman and if there's other male chefs around you, you kind of get that extra attention. Oh, really? Are you okay? Are you gonna be okay, honey? I mean, yeah, if you had a cut, you're fine. Why would it be too much of a difficulty for me? So a lot of times what happens is that if you're 18 or 19 years old and you enter the industry, and again, as I said, you're just that one girl in the kitchen, even if you had that cut, even if you had that burn, you're hiding it because you don't want to grab that unnecessary attention that is going to be taken away from what you actually do or what you're actually passionate about. So that's just it's a very small instance, but it goes a long way. So in general, with other women of the industry that I've spoken to, we have to hide. We have to hide that, maybe you're having a bad day at work, or, you just have to hide your emotions just so that it does not get taken away from what you're actually focused on. Yeah. So I'm assuming that does exist in other industries as well. It's not just kitchen.
I'm actually going to hop over to MPP Aris Babikian for a moment. And Aris, I wondered if you spoke about your experiences in life, and I know that I posed a question to you, and I wonder if I can just take a moment to read that to our audience. How important is diversity and inclusion to you, and why is it important in services organizations?
This is very important question, and it comes to the heart of the Canadian identity. In Canada, we have a multiculturalism policy, which it was brought up to help other cultures, other new arrived people, new settlers to integrate into our community, our country. The good thing about the Canadian multiculturalism concept and the United States, for example, we have a different approach. We do not prescribe to the US melting pot concept. We encourage newcomers to practice their own culture, tradition, heritage, history. And by doing that, we are also contributing to the Canadian society, to the Canadian nation. Today, Canada, it is what it is because of its that inclusion of the diversity in its mainstream policies, political, social, health, and you name it, any other aspect. So that is very important distinction. And I don't pretend that our policies are perfect policies. We still have some bigoted people in our society, but fortunately they are a minority. And we have seen how the diversity helped improve the economic welfare of Canada. Those newcomers, they improve building bridges with their home countries to create cooperation policies, cooperation projects in every walk of life. And also in that way, also improve the image of Canada on the international scene with the international organizations. Because when you look, you have a Canadian representative sitting on major international organizations like the United Nations, World Health Organization, and other organizations. When you see a Chinese, Tamil, Arab, Greek, Armenian, you name it, that gives the impression and that Canada is a place where it is possible to achieve your dream regardless of where you come from. Yes, you will have a face difficulty, but if you put your mind to it, you will be able to achieve what your dreams are. The sky is the limit. I used to go, when I was citizenship judge, I used to go to schools to teach or to talk about the Canadian heritage, Canadian citizenship values. And I will always say to the student, and of course, you know, our schools are so diverse, so multicultural right now. I will tell them, guys, if you do not succeed in Canada, don't blame your parents, your society, your school, anyone else. Blame yourself. Because I will give them my own example. I came to Canada as a refugee from Lebanon 43 years ago, escaping the civil war in Lebanon. I hardly spoke a word of English. I came, but I committed myself to this country. I volunteered, I paid my dues, and by paying those dues, people recognized my contribution, and I was rewarded for it. I was appointed as a citizenship judge. I served as a citizenship judge for 6 years. I got involved in the political volunteerism, helping other candidates, and the beauty of Canada, from the days that I have been involved with multiculturalism with the Canadian Ethnocultural Council, in the beginning, when the multicultural policy came, we had a difficulty reaching out to people, try to explain what it means, multiculturalism. But over the years, by practicing that policy, we don't need to explain anymore what's multiculturalism. It is accepted norm that to see in the bank, in the restaurant, in anywhere in walk of life when you go, in the media. I mean, today, if you look at the Canadian media, my goodness, what a difference it has been happening in the last 5, 6, 7 years ago. I remember when I came to Canada, you wouldn't see any face other than white face. Nothing wrong with the white people. I consider life for many people. But today, you will see the Chinese, the Tamil, they are anchor women, anchor men, reporters, etc. So our diversity evolved. And now we don't need to anyone to include us. We are here. We are force. And we are imposing ourselves. In the political sphere, I will give you another example. When I got involved in '79, my first campaign in Toronto, all the politicians were again from one certain race. Today, when I look at the Legislative Assembly of Ontario, when I looked at Parliament Hill in Ottawa, my goodness, there are so many different culture backgrounds, and this is our success. This is our This is our secret. Many delegations from Australia, Germany, Scandinavian country, they would come to Canada and they will meet with us as a citizenship judges to discuss, to ask what is the secret of the multiculturalism success in Canada. And they will say, you know, we also have multiculturalism policy, but it's not successful as it is in Canada. What is the secret? I will tell them it's not the policy, it's not the paper that it is written on. It is the people, the way interact with each other. I would say again, yes, there are bigoted people. We are not a perfect society. For example, during the COVID pandemic, many people, they came forth and they started blaming the Chinese people for the COVID problem. But we were able to overcome. This whole diversity in Canada, it's evolving process. We achieved so much, and we still lots to achieve ahead of us. And I very strongly believe that it is up to you, regardless of what color, race, religion, ethnicity you belong, it is up to you to show that you are important, integral part of this country and this society.
Well, that's beautiful. Thank you so much for expanding upon that thought. And we are rich because of our diversity in our country. And I know myself, I was born in Scotland, but I've been here all my life. And I remember taking my citizenship with my parents. You know, we have a dual, but I remember there wasn't a lot of diversity when we went to citizenship court. As you had mentioned, but now it has grown. The richness of our country is because of that diversity, welcoming everyone to the table. And as you had mentioned, we don't have to work on it as much, but there are still some things that we do need to be mindful of, as you had said, for overcoming some of the obstacles, I guess, if you will, in the conversation. Your experience is just overwhelming. You have a lot of background. Thank you for sharing that. I'm going to jump over to some of our other panelists, and then they can engage in the conversation, and then we'll open up the floor as well. Do you mind if I go to the right of you then? Manika? So Manika, you're from the fashion industry, and I was wondering if you could maybe speak to our listeners and viewers today, and our panelists, and how important is diversity and inclusion in the fashion industry, and how have you seen that evolve in the time period that you've been there?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's a very important question, and fashion has been changing a lot for especially the last decade. But the reason why representation is so important in fashion is that fashion is interlinked with self-identity, self-esteem, and self-representation. And that's why I would give the example of myself. Of course, on a smaller scale, I come from another province of Canada. My parents also from the East Coast, like I was saying. And just because I was speaking another language, and my parents were francophones, but with a different accent, when I grew up in Quebec, I was feeling different. I was feeling different in Quebec, but when I was going to the East Coast, like I was saying to Dr. Dionne before, I was also different. So I was never really feeling included, and this actually affected me a lot in the way I am, in the way I want to express myself. And we often see fashion as something very superficial. The way we dress, it's only visual, right? But as a personal shopper or a fashion designer, I worked with so many people, and I've seen the transformation with someone wearing something that really reflects their personality. It changes someone completely. And when you wear something in which you feel good, you feel yourself, you have confidence, and then when you have confidence, sky is the limit. So that's why it's so important to create inclusion and representation in fashion, because like if I go behind maybe in the 80s, everything that fashion was reflecting in magazines or on TV was fashion for tall, white women. I will talk about women because that's where I'm in. So imagine a little girl, I would say a black girl, seeing only white, tall, skinny women. The way she will feel, because when she grows up, she needs to be associating that with her. She will feel excluded. She will feel not part of it. And while growing up, it's really about how you position yourself in the world. So if you feel excluded from fashion, the way you will express yourself in your clothing, we can just imagine the result. We can just imagine the behavior problems that it can create. And that's why I chose to work in inclusion in my fashion, because I see the good that it does for the youth. And now, for the last decade, I would say that we're seeing more and more different diversity, body diversity, and also ethnicities in fashion. And we're starting to see to actually acknowledge the good that it's doing for the society and for the youth. So that's how I would bring it.
Interesting. So you have seen it evolve. You see it growing, and we're expanding upon that. As far as maybe a success story that you could share when you have seen change,
Yes.
and someone overcoming that adversity, as far as in being welcome at the table, could you perhaps express something like that for us?
Yes, for sure. I see it a lot, because just by organizing fashion shows, choosing models for my fashion shows. I've been contacted by a lot of girls, and at first I felt that it was a dream in them to be a model, let's say, and to be on a runway or in magazines, but because they were not white, or they were not part of the very narrow type of what we would see, they would really contacting me, but with no confidence that they could be there, that they could be, a model. So, and for the last 8 years, I've been hiring models that were of any ethnicities, and I see how it makes girls feel to be there, to be representing, to be wearing fashion, to be expressing themselves as well, and to also create a fashion that is talking to them now talking only to a specific clientele. So I see it in the fashions. I see it for my client as well. And I see, just by hearing them, their expressions, their confidence, the way that, it makes them feel good, and I love seeing that.
And to piggyback on what you had said as well, how would you find that you're respected in the industry then, because you're inclusive in your thought,
Yes.
in your planning, in your business planning?
I didn't hear the first part.
For sure. How would you find that you are respected amongst peers and in the industry because you are making that your part of your mandate, your mantra?
Okay. I think now we're making inclusion a trend because it has to become a trend. It's something that we talk more and more, and it's something that people are starting to consider. And now I've been, since I started, it was my goal to bring the diversity into fashion. And of course, But I think it's well respected to put diversity and inclusion in the front now. Yes.
And doing a little shout out for you for anybody that's listening and tuning in. Manika Fashion will be doing a fashion show at the Toronto Diversity Festival August 27th at Nathan Phillips Square, 11 a.m. to 10 p.m. She won't be doing a fashion show all day long, but please come and check out her models, her work, and the collaboration from community. I'm going to move on to Tushar. Unadkat, and Tushar is an actor, but he can tell you a little bit more about himself. One of the questions we posed to Tushar is, if you don't mind, I'm just going to take a moment to read that. Tushar, why is diversity and inclusion important to keep on the forefront of the arts, and how have you seen the growth in education and awareness?
Thanks for the question, Lynn. Diversity is any dimension that can differentiate groups and people from one another. So, in a nutshell, it's about empowering people by respecting and appreciating what makes them different in terms of age, gender, ethnicity, religion, disability, sexual orientation, education, and national origin. Toronto, with nearly half of its population born outside of Canada, is often referred to be the most multicultural city in the world, with over 200 ethnic groups and with over 140 languages spoken. I'm a marketing and communications professional, and yes, I come from arts background, and hence it's the right question to reiterate what my observations have been. And I use all social media platforms and would like to represent not just the artists, but all creative professionals. While browsing through LinkedIn, I came across this video by Laurie Reitman, who is an HR leader, who talks interestingly about inclusiveness. She said the world went through a profound change in 2020, we all know that, but the push for equality in the workplace is still not over. Inclusion is a requirement for today's workforce, especially but not exclusive to Gen Z. An inclusive environment acknowledges the unique experiences and perspectives everyone brings to the table. People feel valued, and organizations understand performance and motivation on an individual level so that each employee is respected and empowered to succeed. Creating an inclusive environment is something all managers must do to attract and keep talented workers. So it's about recruitment, as earlier Dr. mentioned, and it's about retention, that yes, you've recruited, but then what do you do, and how to retain that voice. Talking about public education and awareness, here are 3 things you can do. To create a more inclusive work environment, gain a competitive advantage in the marketplace, and give your employees a reason to stay. Educate yourself based on inclusion. Nobody is born a great manager, so just like you learn how to hold an effective meeting or provide feedback to someone who isn't performing, you've got to commit to learning the basics of inclusion. We need to offer programs to create a more inclusive work environment that can help you recognize your personal biases. It is necessary to be curious about experiences and feelings. Workers experience inclusion on 2 levels. First, their own daily experience on the job. Then what's happening on a broader organization. So ask your direct reports what they think and how they feel about important topics like acceptance, trust, and experience relating to HR policies, practices, and rules. I like to ask, what is one thing you need from me to make your experience at work twice as good? And then try to make it happen. Remember, inclusion isn't for a specific demographic. Sometimes it is easy for managers to think that stuff only matters to people who look different or are younger. It's true that Gen Z workers, those born between 1995 and 2005, prioritize inclusion on surveys. However, all employees want to feel respected and given equal opportunities to succeed. Double down on your commitment to inclusion. Invest in your learning. Be curious about your employees' experiences. Question your assumptions about the workforce, and be relentlessly inclusive. It's a priority for all employees, not just the youngest generation of workers. Well, that's what I mean in a nutshell is how are we going to educate and continue practicing diversity and inclusion? And this is one step closer by holding such panel discussions, and it is about education. This panel discussion will be shared, will be online available, and we should try and share it as far as it can go to make that awareness possible.
Tushar, thank you for that. And that's being relentless is what really stood out to me. And it really should be at the core of who we are as a whole person, really. And if we need to cultivate that, how do we do that? How do we learn from that, and how do we grow? I want to open up the floor to the panelists for an open discussion. And if there's any questions for each other, please and thank you, feel free to do so. I know, Dr. Dion Poulton, you probably have a variety of things to share working in the industry that you have been working in, industries, plural. If there's anything you wanted to share, and then maybe we can kind of go from there.
Sure. So you mentioned the Gen Zs. I actually have, I'm a mother of 2 Gen Zs in my house, and they're very vocal, very brilliant young women. And I will just share that what comes to mind is just their conversations, just listening into their conversations. And what has come up in those conversations is something called performative activism. And that goes back to what I said initially, is it's not enough just to diversify, because if we go into a standard workplace environment, of course it's diverse down the bottom, but the higher you go, the wider it gets.
Right.
So it has to be intentional. So back to, I like the conversation that you shared about intentionally hiring diverse models. We have to be intentional. And so that's why my focus is on the behaviors. There is systemic racism that exists. I have had the benefit of living both in Canada and the United States, and have experienced it in both countries to this day. But I look at the behaviors of people. I look at, how do you treat me? How do you approach me? How do you respect me? Are you exhibiting microaggressions toward me? In that, are you saying side insults, or are you actually looking in my eye and having conversations? And it comes down to how you speak to people and how you talk to people. And I will say too that, and having lived, of course, in both countries again, that geography does not determine a level of consciousness, or a level of liberalism, or a level of whatever. It's just, it comes down to individuals, because there's ignorance everywhere.
Thank you. Thank you. Suman, did you want to add something to the conversation there?
That was very impactful what you just said. And
Thank you.
just kind of rings this bell that, about microaggression, and especially even that, sometimes people do it knowingly and unknowingly, and the way how you react is more important. To sum it up, from my end, what I'll say is that, and just to add that culinary retrospect to this especially, food is an integral part of our society. Food is an integral part of our existence, all right? Even when you sit down at a table and you see that, you see people from all different walks of life bringing the good. But we also need to accept that, not every society is perfect, not everyone is perfect, but to accept it and then move ahead and get past it, that's very crucial. That's very crucial for someone like me especially. Now, when it comes down to knowingly and unknowingly include and not include, that's where I think experienced leaders out there should be able to convey to the younger generation, to millennials or Gen Z, whatever it is, it really matters how we're going to react. It's really important that a change is being made, and it starts from all of us. Yeah.
Wow. Thank you both. Thank you. I'll jump over to MPP Aris Babikian. Did you want to add into the conversation in terms of making difference moving forward? How do we do that?
Well, human behavior, it takes a long time to change human behavior. The most dangerous aspect for humans are the unknown. So when our country was open to diversity, to multiculturalism. It took us a long time to adapt, to adjust the mainstream masses' behavior to the new concept, and that is the multiculturalism concept. Celebrating, accepting our differences, celebrating our differences, our diversity. Because by celebrating our diversity, also we're benefiting you as mainstream society, because we know everything is dictated on economy, on trade. By opening new markets for our businesses, our industries around the world, and all the diverse groups that they are part of our society, they help that economic improvement, economic development. And that is helping our businesses, our different industries. And when we look at our institutions, for example, the social society institutions, I have never seen so many different organization institutions which are involved in promoting diversity and inclusion in Toronto, in Ontario. I mean, right now, because I'm fortunate, I'm in public sphere, I have to deal with so many organizations. When I go and visit them, there are so many cultural festivals, there are so many food fairs. For example, one of the things, tonight I'm going to attend the opening of the first Halal Rib Fest. Who could have imagined that in Canada you're going to have Halal Rib Fest? So this is how our society is changing, evolving, and we are changing in the right direction. It is not as we want, as fast as we want, but I am confident and comparing, like I'm sure that all of you visited so many different countries, or we come from different countries where, especially from international overseas, we have seen how people are being persecuted because of their ethnicity, their political opinions, their cultural background, etc. And when we compare what we have in Canada, there is no comparison, to be honest with you. So, and we should continue that path. We are, all of us, in different ways, food, fashion, and other means, we are helping changing and making this the norm. Mm-hmm. And I'm confident that in few years' time, we will have more manifest itself, this whole new approach, that inclusiveness. To be honest with you, as a minority, mm-hmm. as a foreign-born, I don't believe in quotas mm-hmm. Concept. Mm-hmm. That because of the business people, the organization, the politician, the government, they have to include so many blacks, so many Chinese, so many Middle Eastern, or so many things. As the doctor here mentioned, this is something that we have to demonstrate that we are worthy of the position that we're getting, where we are holding a position. So this is something that it will at the end it will work out. And very optimist, very positive, and we always should look for the best.
Yeah.
Thank you. Finding the light and moving forward, I appreciate that very much. Manik, do you want to add something to the conversation there?
Yeah, I was listening to what Mr. Babikian was saying, and it's true that it takes time for the human psyche or human people to evolve and change, and but I acknowledge, I see change now in the new generation by the way their language, what they're speaking, like Dr. Dionne was saying with her kids, but I'm also in contact with some kids and I hear their language, and you can tell that because things are changing, it's affecting the youth and they don't have the same narrative than what we were hearing a few decades ago. I think one of the things that also is making some of the changes is also, I would say, the internet, social media, the fact that we feel closer to another in the world. And social media also uses influencers. Not everything is good with influencers, but there are good things because when you see someone that is not from your same ethnicity group or body diversity, showing something, now you can also relate. You can relate to that person, and that's changing a lot. You hear young people talking about gender, identity, the way that you would never hear before when I was young, let's say. So yeah, it takes time. It takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of people to have intention to change. It takes governments, it takes money to help, but in the end, I think that we see the change. And when you look at the young people, you can wish that it's going to continue that way and things are going to get better and better in the future. Yes.
Sounds like words of wisdom to me. Yes. Tushar, any words of wisdom to wrap up our conversation?
Diversity is the way to go. You know, a lot of people I've heard when I interact here within the Canadian spectrum is that, oh, racism, or we are not included, or whatever differences. My formative years were in India. I was born and raised there. Also, I've lived outside of India longer than I lived in India. But one strong thing what I learned is India has 29 states with 29 different languages, clothing, food habits. The whole cultural spectrum is so diverse that if you travel from one state to the another, you might have the similar experience where you could be excluded. You could be part of a different state, and hence you're not included in that closer fraternity. And that worked as a great platform for me to not take any of these international experiences personally, because it is human nature, as we said. It is anywhere and everywhere. All the countries I was privileged to live in, I felt that it was, there'll be bigots, as MPP Aris said, but it's a small section. The world at large is more tolerant and has become more accepted, have a lot of acceptance towards the change and the multicultural factor. So I think it's very hopeful, and we are heading towards a positive direction.
Oh, thank you. Any final thoughts? Yes.
I just want to make a comment, because I agree with everything that's being said here, and I always ask the question, what percentage of DNA do we all have in common?
Yeah.
Yeah.
99.9% DNA in common. So we're all related. At the end of the day, we're all related, and it's how do we treat each other? We should be focusing on our humanity. I don't want to dismiss all the isms, the racism, homophobia, and sexism, and so on, but I think we're in agreement that absolutely, with hard work, we're representation of that you can really overcome. And I don't sound like it's too utopian, but I really believe that if you really believe that you are entitled to get what you deserve, after putting in the hard work, I believe that it's feasible, and I'm a living testimony of that.
Amazing. That's amazing. Any final comments before we wrap up?
Just go after it. Just go after it.
Wow.
Yeah.
I may add one more short comment. One of the reasons I am very optimistic about the future is that today the decision makers in our society, in our way of life, are the same people that we represent here. The diverse groups that came and formed the Canadian multicultural concept that I don't want to use the word tolerance because the word tolerance to me, it had a negative connotation because what you mean you're tolerating me? But acceptance, inclusion, these are much better two words to use. And when I see that today, because I've seen it in every sphere of life, that different background, different cultural groups, different colored people are the decision makers today in every sphere of life. And that's why it gives me hope that we are building a society which is unique society, which is called Canada the best country in the world.
On the word hope, I think we're going to wrap up our panel discussion today, and we have been very, very fortunate to explore this conversation because of Moksha Canada Foundation. And Moksha Canada Foundation has allowed us to be here today to invite all of our guest panelists, but it's exploring what it means to be a world citizen, exploring what it means to give back to community, exploring what it means to stay true to yourself and stay true to your heart, and contribute to our society as a whole. So we want to say 1,000 thank yous to all of our guest panelists. Don't forget to check out the Toronto Diversity Festival at Nathan Phillips Square, August 27th from 11 a.m. to 10 p.m. Moksha Canada is about connecting, creating, and engaging our community, and we're certainly doing that today and moving forward. We thank you all for attending. Don't forget to follow us on social media and give us a like and press the going button to our festival on Saturday, August 27th. My name is Lynn McEntee, and I've been your host for the event today, and I will see you on Saturday at Moksha Canada Foundation's Toronto Diversity Festival.